which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Well, a warm hello. This is Dan Arth, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the June 17th issue of the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And how about we go right to the weather, the 7-day forecast for Niagara Falls. Today, high of 21, low of 17. Winds will be southwest at about 30 kilometers per hour. It's going to be a mix of sun and clouds. That is for today. And tomorrow looks like a high of 22, low of 14. Winds will be 49 kilometers per hour, and there's going to be a little bit of some thunderstorms tomorrow, Thursday. And on Friday, your high will be 21, low of 13. Winds will be about 24 kilometers per hour, and again, those thunderstorms will be sticking around. On Saturday, the weekend, woohoo! High of 21 degrees, low of 13, winds at 21 kilometers per hour, and for your start of your weekend, mainly sunny all day Saturday. And on Sunday, another all day of sunshine, high of 22, low of 14, and winds will drop down to about 17 kilometers per hour. Monday, going to see some rain, high of 20, low of 14, winds about 17 kilometers per hour. And then Tuesday, it's going to be a mix, sun and clouds, high of 22, low of 15, and the winds will be about 15 kilometers per hour. So that was your weather for Niagara Falls, and we'll move to the headlines in the Niagara Falls Review. First article, vacancy rates bringing some relief to renters. Article is by Matthew P. Barker. Vacancy rates are behind increases or drops in Niagara rental prices, says a leading market observation company. Rentals.ca, a rental aggregate website, recently released its June report highlighting rates across Canada have declined 4.7% from last year. It said rents have been dropping nationally for 20 consecutive months, but Niagara residents may be seeing a different picture depending where in the region they are looking. Since hitting record highs in May 2024, prices have fallen by an average of almost 8% across the country, but are still above pre-pandemic rates, said Giacomo Landis, Rentals.ca Associate Director of Communications. There's different stories that are starting to happen in the Niagara region, he said, adding those stories are being written by varying vacancy rates. In Niagara Falls, a high vacancy rate is helping drive down rental rates, while low vacancy rates in St. Catharines and Welland are doing the opposite. Niagara Falls saw rents across the board drop by about 6% from this time last year for 1 and 2 bedroom units, ending May at $1,660 and $2,026 respectively. Month to month from April to May, the rental rate for 1 bedroom apartments dropped 1.6%, while 2 bedroom units increased 1.4% in Niagara Falls. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp reports that Niagara Falls has a vacancy rate of over 6%, which is very, very high, said Ladas. There's a lot of supply in Niagara Falls, and we can see the amount of building happening in the city. Meanwhile, St. Catharines' vacancy rate is below 3%. The cost of renting 1 bedroom apartments increased 0.5% from last year and 1.9% from April to end at $1,652. 2 bedroom rentals across the city were $1,942, increasing from April by 2.5%, but decreasing 12.5% from last year. A 3% rental vacancy rate is widely considered by economists and housing authorities as the baseline threshold for a balanced, healthy rental market. St. Catharines' rate is 2.5%. We'd like to see more of the vacancy rates increasing to above that 3%, said Ladas. There's a lot more supply in Niagara Falls. Vacancy rates are higher and prices are going down faster, he said. St. Catharines, not as much supply. Vacancy rates are much lower, and we're seeing some modest increases still. In Welland, a vacancy rate of about 2% helped push rents higher in May as one-bedroom rentals increased to $1,619, up 4.1% from last year and 2.7% from April. Two-bedroom rentals rose to $2,016, an 8.5% annual increase and a 4.6% rise over the April rate. We still are seeing a high demand for people moving to Welland, Ladas said. They're just lagging in adding supply, and because of that, it's a tighter rental market where demand is high and supply is lower. So hopefully it's going to start to catch up a little bit and bring those prices down. Landlords offering move-in incentives have increased, which means better opportunities for tenants to come out ahead when looking for a new home, Ladas said. Move-in incentives are not going anywhere anytime soon, he added. People are not even looking at a listing if it doesn't offer something because that's how many are now offering move-in gifts. Ladas said competition between landlords is becoming the norm and the use of incentives is increasing. Move-in incentives he's seen include 3 months free rent plus gift cards to home furniture and accessory businesses such as IKEA and Structube on top of that. 2 months free rent seemed to be the given. We're now seeing 3 months free rent, and it's going to be a relief for renters after many years of rapid rent inflation, Ladas said. And our next headline story, Niagara woman reunites with cat after 12 years. When I did call her name, she did come running over to me. Article is by Mike Zettel. Despite having to surrender her beloved cat more than a dozen years ago, Brittany McNutt never forgot Bean. And it turns out, after all this time, Bean never forgot about her. Dealing with an unstable living situation and mental health issues, the Fort Erie woman surrendered her 2 cats to a family member in 2013. The cats lived with the family member for a couple of years before being taken to the Humane Society in St. Catharines. Fast forward to last week, and Bean, a fluffy 21-year-old calico, was brought to the same agency now called the Humane Society of Greater Niagara by a family member of its current owner, who had recently died. Executive Director Cindy Dunn said staff wanted to make sure the cat, which had been renamed Purr, was adopted out to someone as quickly as possible. Ideally, a cat of 21 years of age would not spend time in a shelter, she said. We want positive outcomes for an animal to live out the rest of their days in a home where they're being cared for and loved by someone. When the Humane Society posted Purr's photo on social media, something unprecedented happened. McNutt recognized her. It was Bean. McNutt said she recognized a spot on her cat's lip and patterns in her fur. She showed her sister the post, and the two gathered old photos of Bean and posted them in the social media site's comment section. The markings were very recognizable and hard to copy. She said, "There's no way there's another cat that has those exact same markings. I knew it was her." Normally, when a cat is surrendered to the Humane Society, records of ownership are kept. However, when Bean and the other cat were surrendered, staff were told they were strays, which made tracing ownership all but impossible. McKnight said at the time she wasn't told her cats were taken to the Humane Society, only that they were taken to a better place, which in a roundabout way was true. The cat responded very favorably to Brittany. McNutt said she wasn't sure how Bean would react when staff brought her out, if she would even recognize or remember her, but for her part, it was love again at first sight. It was so amazing. It was so good to see her again, she said. I was just like, oh my God, here's my cat. Here she is, finally. She held Bean for a minute, then put her down to let her get comfortable. She just instantly started purring, and when I did call her name, she did come running over to me, McNutt said. Dunn said she's never heard of a reunion after such a long time. In most cases, owners reconnect with their pets in shelters after like a few days, at most a couple of weeks. The chance of this happening is so rare, she said. Brittany never forgot about her cats, and she thought about them with a lot of frequency over the years. The surrendering of a pet, whether it's through a family member or to the Humane Society, when you're faced with a personal crisis, it's not a failure. It's really an act of caring, an act of love. That animal mattered to her all this time. Bean is now able to spend her final years in McNutt's home with her 2 daughters, her husband, and his 2 children. She also shares it with another older animal, a dog, as well as a 3-year-old cat McNutt recently adopted. So far, McNutt said the pets all get along, although she's keeping Bean separated until she eases into her new environment. And when McNutt's home from work, Bean's never far from her side. I just cuddle with her every chance I get with her, she said. She's been purring so much. She's been vocal as well. She lets us know she's here and that we should probably go over and pet her. She was always like that, even when she was younger. Very, very vocal. And now moving over to sports. World Cup 2026, building the beautiful game. Hosting World Cup will set stage for soccer to reach new heights in Canada, organizer says. Article by Gemma Carstens-Smith. Watching the first men's World Cup game to ever be played on Canadian soil, Peter Montopoli felt grateful and relieved. The country's chief tournament officer has spent the past decade working to bring soccer's biggest showcase to Canada. Now that it's here, Montopoli believes all the hard work has been worthwhile. It's overwhelming in a certain way to see how the country's embraced it, to see how everybody was so enthralled with the moment, he said. Everybody loves a World Cup, but why wouldn't we want to be ambitious in hosting the game? It was a relief and a reward for the country. Montopoli was in Toronto Stadium on Friday as Canada earned a historic first World Cup point in a 1-1 draw with Bosnia-Herzegovina. The next night he was in Vancouver with FIFA President Gianni Infantino for that city's first game where Australia blanked Turkey 2-0. Infantino has been to Vancouver many times, Montopoli said, but hadn't seen its stadium, BC Place, kitted out for the World Cup. There's a stadium, and then there's a FIFA stadium, he said. He just loved the spectacle of it. You could tell that he was very enamored with how the stadium looks and feels, and just the reception of the people, and the people welcoming him. This summer's tournament is the biggest ever, with 48 teams competing in 104 games across Canada, the United States, and Mexico between June 11th and July 19th. Toronto is staging 6 games while Vancouver puts on 7. The Parliamentary Budget Officer issued a report last month estimated that the federal government will spend $473 million to host the games, with another $593 million coming from other levels of government. The report said the average of $82 million per game is roughly in line with what previous host countries have spent. For the last 10 years, a large part of Montepoli's job has been convincing people that bringing the World Cup makes sense for the country, then encouraging them to put in as many resources as possible to make it special. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We had high standards here in Canada, he said, and we just tried and set the tone of why people are doing this, what you're doing it for. In a lot of ways, we were doing it for Canada. We were doing it for football. The tournament isn't only about the games in Toronto Stadium and BC Place, he added. From the beginning, Canada's bid included plans to bring the energy and excitement of the World Cup to as many parts of the country as possible. FIFA took the golden trophy to 7 cities across the country in April and May and is now staging Canada Celebrates, a 40-stop tour that includes viewing parties, live entertainment, and soccer-themed activities. Toronto and Vancouver are also staging fan festivals, and Montepoli checked out the Vancouver version on Sunday, giving it a glowing review. It's so beautiful to see how everybody's getting along, he said. Everybody's high-fiving. Everybody's having a great experience. That's the People's World Cup. That's the way it's supposed to be. And so it's just beautiful to see every country represented here in Vancouver for a World Cup. Beautiful. It's about humanity. Montepoli, former Secretary General of Canada Soccer, believes the true beauty of hosting the games is yet to come. While the tournament will have economic benefits, he sees the lasting impact on soccer across the country being even larger. It'll change the sport, he said. Let's just get more people involved in the sport to make it bigger and better. It's the world's game, so why can't it be that in Canada? That's what I've always felt. Soccer already has the highest participation numbers of any sport across the country, and staging these 13 games in Vancouver and Toronto will both drive investment and show kids there's a pathway to playing at the highest levels, Montepoli said. He noted that Toronto previously hosted the U20 World Cup in 2007, and that tournament's impact can still be seen today in BMO Field, the venue that's been renamed Toronto Stadium for the World Cup. I think it's time to rally everything behind the sport. Having kids aspire to be a national team athlete, to be a professional footballer, he said. In our country, maybe they're aspiring to be hockey players or something, but there's nothing wrong with trying to aspire to be a footballer. And now you can see there are opportunities to do that, he said. As for his own future, Montepoli is less clear. He has spent decades shaping and shepherding soccer across Canada and hasn't given much thought to where he might turn his attention when the World Cup concludes. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to do this for football, to do this for Canada, and we'll see what comes next, he said. I'm happy to sit back and watch the next generation do their work. I'd be happy just to do that. That's enough. And our next sports article from the Niagara Falls Review, Tortorella not returning as coach of Golden Knights. Article by Stephen Wino. John Tortorella will not return as coach of the Vegas Golden Knights after guiding them to the Stanley Cup final on an interim basis. Uncertainty lingered over the situation through the team's elimination in Game 6 of the final against Carolina on Sunday night. General Manager Kelly McCrimmon announced Tuesday that Tortorella would not be back. We thank Torts for the guidance he provided our team since joining the organization in March, McCrimmon said. When the decision was made to bring Torts to Vegas, we needed an immediate impact to help us at a pivotal point in the season. Torts' experience and leadership proved to be the boost that we were looking for, helping guide us to the Stanley Cup final. We are grateful for Torts' passion, sincerity, and commitment to our organization, and we wish him and his family the very best. McCrimmon hired Tortorella on March 30th when he fired Bruce Cassidy with 8 games left in the season. The Golden Knights won 7 of them, and they got through 3 rounds before losing to the Hurricanes in the final. Players spoke highly of how Tortorella handled jumping in this spring, and that praise continued on exit day after finding out he would not return. Rasmus Andersson said Tortorella was a perfect fit at a perfect time for us. Torts was awesome, fellow defenseman Shea Theodore said. I think he was really what our group needed at the end to kind of push in the playoffs, push us in the playoffs. A lot of credit to him. He was a fantastic coach. Tortorella, who turned 68 next week, is 22 years removed from coaching Tampa Bay to the Stanley Cup in 2004. After his time with the Lightning, he spent time running the bench for the New York Rangers, Vancouver, Columbus, and Philadelphia, and was out of the league for roughly a year before getting the call from McCrimmon. It's a tough situation for a coach to come in with that little time left, said Vegas's Noah Hannafin, who won gold at the Olympics when Tortorella was on staff as an assistant. And just the way he was able to kind of get us back on the right track fast and give us a chance was pretty impressive. Tortorella took criticism in recent days for deciding to stick with goaltender Carter Hart, whose .863 save percentage was the lowest in the final since Minnesota's John Casey in 1991. Hart and Tortorella overlapped with the Flyers from 2022 to 2024. McCrimmon is scheduled to speak to reporters on Wednesday. One avenue Vegas could go with for Tortorella's successor is promoting Ryan Craig, who has been coach of its top affiliate, the Henderson Silver Knights of the American Hockey League, for the past 3 seasons. Our next article will be from the business section. Food prices hit single Canadians harder than couples, report finds. Survey comes as Ottawa details new affordability plan. Article by Estella Wren. Canadians living alone spend about $102 a week on groceries on average, $22 more than individuals who live in a shared household, a recent report shows. A survey of 1,500 adult residents across Canada conducted by Interac in May found that single Canadians face greater grocery price pressures than multiple person households, with nearly 8 in 10 people living alone saying their grocery bills continue to rise despite their efforts to cut costs. After years of elevated inflation, food experts told The Star that a weekly grocery bill of more than $100 today would likely have been at least 20 to 30% lower 5 years ago. The report comes just a few days after Prime Minister Mark Carney announced Canada's first national food security strategy, pledging $3 billion over 10 years to build a, quote, more affordable food system. While experts applaud the government's investment, they differ in their level of optimism about how much it will help curb food prices. Still, they agree that any relief is unlikely to come in the short term. It's not surprising Canadians living alone spend more on groceries than couples, says Michael Van Massau, a professor of food economics at the University of Guelph. Much of the Canadian grocery system is built around volume, larger package, lower per unit costs. The structure of our food system and the way we deliver food through retail, Massau says, makes it tougher for people in single-person households to buy as effectively. But inflation has exacerbated the gap in grocery spending between singles and couples, he added. But will Ottawa's new food strategy lower grocery bills? The multi-billion-dollar strategy unveiled last week looks to expand and build new food terminals which would lower procurement costs for independent grocers. The strategy is also taking aim at boosting food production and processing in Canada. The Star has reported that Liberal officials say the plan does not include a target for lowering food prices, but will focus on addressing gaps in Canada's food system that contribute to higher costs. The notion was endorsed by Massow, who said, "People are bound to be disappointed if they expect grocery prices to fall in the short term." The Canadian food strategy is incredible, he said. "I think it's a very positive move. It will increase the resilience of our food system. It will reduce the risk of big price swings in the future." But the strategy's focus on increasing domestic food production is more likely to help prevent future price increases than bring current prices down, Massow said. Given that many of the factors driving food costs, climate change, geopolitical tensions, are beyond the government's control. In the short term, Canada can help make higher food prices more manageable for consumers by providing additional support to lower income households, he added. Measures such as the recently expanded GST-HST credit, now renamed the Canada Groceries and Essentials Benefit, could help ease the financial burden. Gary Sands, Senior Vice President of the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers, said he believes the strategy will help lower food prices in the long term, even if it is not a silver bullet for consumers. It provides the opportunity for independents to get more product without going to a wholesaler, he said, reducing transportation and distribution costs. That is good for consumers. Sylvain Charbois, director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, said the agriculture and food industry needs more than financial support. He would like to see the federal and provincial governments removing interprovincial trade barriers so processors and producers can more easily sell products across provincial borders. Charbois said he was disappointed that the national strategy lacks measurable targets. At the end of the day, people are asking, will it make a difference at the grocery store? He said, when you don't have measurable goals, it's very difficult to see whether or not the policy or investments will actually make a difference. And our next article in the business section of the Niagara Falls Review, struggling Pizza Hut to be sold for $2.7 billion. Article by Michelle Chapman and Deanne Durbin. Pizza Hut, the 68-year-old chain that has long struggled with growing competition and outdated restaurants, will be sold for $2.7 billion USD by parent company Yum Brands. Yum said Tuesday the private equity firm Long Range Capital will buy Pizza Hut, excluding the mainland China business, for about $1.5 billion. The mainland China Pizza Hut will be purchased by Yum China Holdings, Inc. for approximately $1.2 billion, the company said. China is Pizza Hut's second largest market outside the United States, accounting for 19% of sales. Yum Brands, which also owns KFC and Taco Bell, began to explore its options for Pizza Hut in November. Last year, Yum Brands' global sales rose 5%, but Pizza Hut's sales fell 2%. In February, Yum Brands announced plans to close 250 U.S. Pizza Hut locations. Pizza Hut had 19,974 restaurants worldwide at the end of last year. Pizza Hut has long been the weak link in Yum's portfolio. Neil Saunders, managing director of Global Data, wrote Tuesday, despite efforts to revitalize the brand and shut underperforming locations, it has become increasingly clear that pushing the division back into growth will require a level of investment and patience that Yum is just not prepared to commit, he said. Pizza Hut was founded in 1958 in Wichita, Kansas by two brothers who borrowed $600 from their mother to open the store. They chose the name because their sign only had room for 8 letters. Pizza Hut's familiar red roof debuted in 1969, and by 1971 it was the top pizza chain in the world by sales. PepsiCo acquired Pizza Hut in 1977 but spun off its restaurant division, which became Yum Brands in 1997. By the 1980s, Domino's was the fastest growing U.S. pizza company, buoyed by its promise of 30-minute delivery. As carry out and delivery grew in popularity, Pizza Hut was saddled with large dine-in restaurants. The chain has been further pinched in recent years by the growth of DoorDash, Uber Eats, and other restaurant delivery companies. By selling Pizza Hut, Yum Brands can focus more on its brands with stronger sales, CEO Chris Turner said. Under long range in Yum China, Pizza Hut will be well positioned for future growth with ownership that brings deep expertise in the restaurant industry, Turner said in a statement. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And our next article will be from Local News. 4th graders spark council call for clean water in Indigenous communities. Students pushing for change after spending the year researching. Article by Karina Walter. A group of St. Catherine's elementary students passionate about ensuring safe drinking water for Indigenous communities say they never thought their school project would lead to change at City Hall. The grade 4A class at Beacon Christian School has been studying 9 Indigenous communities with boil water advisories and inviting politicians to their classroom to hear about the conditions as they advocate for clean water. That sparked an invitation to present their research to City Council when councillors unanimously passed a motion inspired by the class calling on Canada to accelerate efforts, funding, and infrastructure investments necessary to eliminate all remaining long-term boil water advisories in Indigenous communities. Reflecting on the experience days later, the kids in teacher Jeff Brooks's class were surprised and happy to see their advocacy heard. I did not know that our project would lead to all this, said Brinley, one of the students in the class. I just thought it would be a regular school project, and it was crazy seeing how that happened. Her classmate Chloe agreed. At first, I thought it was just something we studied, and then we talked about their water, and we kept going. And now it's amazing. It's really surprising to me that I get to make a change in Ontario, hopefully. Another classmate, Elodie, who is Ojibwe, said she also didn't think the students were going to end up at City Hall. I had no idea how far we could get with this. I mean, they don't deserve this. No one deserves unclean drinking water. Gathering the facts, Brooks said he wanted to do a project with the class related to justice seeking, which is one of the themes at the North End Christian School. In a world full of injustice, students consider what they can do to remedy it. The students had a unit on Indigenous peoples, and when they learned many communities do not have access to clean, safe, drinkable water, they thought it was time to do something. Brooks said he's passionate about Indigenous communities and culture, so it was a good opportunity to take on the project. The students started research in October, breaking off into groups and focusing on 9 communities experiencing the worst water issues. Brooks said they researched the communities thoroughly, looking at how many people live there, what animals are there, what the name of the chief is, and other general information. Then they looked into what exactly is causing their water problems. There are more than just these communities that have water advisories. We just did the worst of the worst, said Ian, one of the students. The students also wrote letters to chiefs and heard back from the community of Grassy Narrows in northwestern Ontario, where its river is contaminated with mercury dumped by a pulp and paper mill decades ago. The class members are now pen pals with a grade 4 class there and have met them on Zoom. Brooks said most of the students came to the conclusion after their research that water issues were mainly infrastructure based, with water treatment plants that are old and not getting updated. A sense of injustice. Canada has the most clean water in the world as a country, and it's not fair that we have communities in our country that don't have clean drinking water, said Brindley. That sentiment came up multiple times in a conversation with 10 of the boys and girls. I agree with you guys. I think it's not fair, said Chloe. Even in Ontario, in Canada, they still don't get the same water treatment as us. It made the students look at their own taps differently, said Victoria. I used to not notice water, like, for example, when I was brushing my teeth, and now I realize how important water is. Showing their work. The class first presented their project to St. Catharines MPP Jenny Stevens, then to a group with Mayor Matt Sisko, Deputy Mayor Bill Phillips, and St. George's Councillor Kevin Townsend, and lastly to St. Catharines MP Chris Biddle. In a letter to council ahead of the motion, Biddle said the students shared thoughtful insights on the importance of access to clean drinking water in First Nation communities across Canada. He said it has been a priority for the federal government since 2015, which has undertaken 1,415 water infrastructure projects in partnership with First Nations. He said 40 long-term advisories remain, with construction complete on 21, construction begun on 13, and funding in place for all remaining communities. The students' presentation talked about what they learned and called for change. They were thanked by counselors and the mayor, and the motion for the federal government to accelerate efforts was made by Townsend and Phillips. Phillips said it was a worthwhile issue and an educational moment for students who worked hard on the project. They brought it to a governing body such as us, and now they can see that all their hard work is going one step further. It just shows this young group and other young groups that if you work hard and you take all the right steps, what is so important to you can matter, and it can go farther. Brooks said the students were excited after they left council chambers. We celebrated together, and I just let them know how much their hard work paid off. They really created change, and they made a difference, he said. Our hope is that that's going to be a catalyst, and it's going to create lasting change for these communities, especially for Grassy Narrows and for our pen pals that we've connected with. Some students have been left with a lasting interest in the issue. I also think that just because we're here doesn't mean we need to stop, said Evelyn. It still means we can keep going and have more chances to make more changes. Moving over to the arts and life section, off-pitch highlights of the World Cup. Soccer tournaments buzziest moments so far, from Alanis Morissette's near miss to Justin Trudeau's boyfriend duties. Article by Sarah Lang. While there's plenty of sporting action happening on the pitch this World Cup, including our favorite subgenre footballers being dramatic, like Aussie Connor Metcalf's gloriously over-the-top celebration of his upset-sealing goal against Turkey, the stuff the internet can't get enough of is happening in the stands, on the sidelines, and on social media. As Toronto hosts soccer's biggest tournament for the first time, alongside Vancouver and multiple cities in Mexico and the U.S., athletes, celebrity guests, and visiting soccer fans alike are giving us plenty to talk about. Take a water break, grab an orange slice, and let's run through the buzziest talking points from the 2026 FIFA World Cup so far. Alanis Morissette has a near-miss collision with players seconds after she belted "O Canada" at Toronto Stadium before Canada's first World Cup match. Alanis Morissette narrowly avoided being trampled by Bosnian players intent on crossing the field for kickoff. Mic in hand and wearing heels, the Canadian music legend was able to nimbly hop out of the way shortly before contact was made, but it was close. Team Canada, take notes. This was the second of 3 opening ceremonies for the World Cup, a first, and what happens when you've got 3 countries playing co-host. Michael Bublé and Alessia Cara headlined alongside Morissette at Canada's ceremony, while Shakira fronted Mexico's, and Katy Perry, supported by a certain former prime minister, led festivities for the U.S. Ryan Reynolds and Mike Myers watch first match in Toronto. Last week, most celebrities were too busy haranguing their publicists to get them Knicks tickets to pay much attention to the World Cup. Ryan Reynolds noted, Canadian and majority owner of the Wrexham football side is no such bandwagoner. In fact, he took planes, trains, and automobiles and a water taxi to make sure he was in the stands at Toronto Stadium for the opening Team Canada match on Friday, one of the greatest atmospheres this sport has seen, he said of the evening. Comedy icon Mike Myers, sporting a red bucket hat, was also in the stands for the historic game, as were actor Will Arnett, sprinter Andre Degrassi, and soccer star Christine Sinclair. International visitors weigh in on host cities. International visitors are documenting their impressions of the North American way of life in real time. A German fan known as Freddie has gone viral for documenting his discoveries while road tripping across Canada and the U.S. for the World Cup, with the tagline, "My European mind can't comprehend this." So far, he's given his thoughts on Bass Pro Shops, Walmart, and Waffle House, amassing more than 500,000 followers along the way. Toronto is a good-looking city, opined one Brit who's made a series of popular point-of-view videos about his time as a soccer fan visiting the city. It has a good heart, he said, praising the city's friendliness and diversity. Traveling teams sport jaw-dropping accessories. The jersey is only the beginning of the style story for the world's top football players. While not official team kit, the French players used the pap walk off the plane as a chance to show off their enviable collection of designer bags from France's biggest fashion houses. Kylian Mbappe carried a Dior clutch. Hugo Ekitike wore a giant Chanel quilted flat bag, and Ibrahim Konate toted a Louis Vuitton Speedy. And when the Democratic Republic of Congo's team, the Leopards, disembarked in Houston, the internet couldn't get enough of their custom suits embellished with big cat-inspired details, bold leopard print lapels and tote bags, cheetah brooches that nod to the team's name and proud African heritage. Justin Trudeau makes his loyalties clear. Canada's ex-Prime Minister skipped Toronto's festivities and attended the Los Angeles opening ceremony and kickoff match where Katy Perry, who he has been dating since last year, performed. When this decision raised some eyebrows, given Canada is also hosting this World Cup, Trudeau took to X to explain, "Sometimes supportive boyfriend duties call, but you know who I'm rooting for to take the cup," he wrote, adding the Canadian flag emoji. A tartan army of Scottish fans take over Fenway Park. Undeterred by the fact that they were at a baseball game, not a soccer match, more than 4,000 visiting Scottish football fans took over Boston's iconic Fenway Park on the weekend. The Tartan Army, as these soccer-loving Scots are known, took a break from the World Cup action after their team beat Haiti to make their mark on America's game at a special Scottish celebration night in their honor. Wearing custom shirts and playing the bagpipes, they marched in mass to the stadium where they lent a unique flavor to the proceedings, from dancing to Scottish soccer staple tune Yes Sir, I Can Boogie, to belting in a cappella a rendition of the Flower of Scotland after the American anthem was played. The stars of The Pit take in a game together. When they're not saving lives in an incredibly intense ER, the residents of the hit medical drama The Pit are soccer fans too. Dormant childhood dream realized, wrote Sebedov Mafi, who plays Dr. Baran Hashami in the show, in a caption to her Instagram carousel of photos in the U.S. versus Paraguay game in Los Angeles, along with castmates Taylor Dearden, Issa Briones, and Shabana Aziz. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from your Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And heading back to the business section, we'll take a look at what was happening in the markets today. Markets, well, it would be for yesterday. Markets, S&P, TSX, 35,389.58, up 113.94 points. S&P 500 down 42.94 points, down to 75,1135. Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 328.64 points, up to nearly 52,000 at 51,999.67. NASDAQ down 307.6, down to 26,376.34. The U.S. dollar at 71.45 cents, down 0.7. Gold up U.S. 280 to $4,354.40. Oil is down by U.S. $4.17 at $75.27, and natural gas was up to $3.25, which is an 11-cent increase. In our next article from the business section, CRTC tells Bell Telus to drop fees. Regulator says companies may face penalties otherwise. Article by Sammy Hughes. The CRTC has again issued warnings to Bell Canada and Telus Corp over recently introduced fees the regulator says could be in violation of its new policy prohibiting telecoms from charging customers when they activate, change, or cancel plans. In letters addressed to the two companies last Friday, the day the new rules took effect, the CRTC's Director of Social and Consumer Policy, Nanao Kachi, said Bell and Telus have until Wednesday to confirm they have stopped charging the fees in question. Commission staff will consider all available compliance options to ensure that fees are a barrier to switching cell phone and internet plans are prohibited as intended by the Act, Kachi said in each letter. Last month, the Commission warned Bell that a new $40 device handling fee could violate the policy, saying the charge did not appear to qualify for an exemption. Such exemptions are in place for fees related to optional services and products that consumers agree to purchase, such as add-on equipment that is not required to deliver the service. In Bell's case, the fee applies when customers choose to purchase a device along with their wireless service plan. CRTC Vice President of Consumer Analytics and Strategy Scott Hutton had said a fee associated with providing a phone may be considered to be an activation fee that is prohibited. Bell responded in a letter last week saying the charge should be exempt from the new rules because it is related to an optional purchase a customer would choose to make. Meanwhile, Telus introduced a $15 fee last week for customers switching to a new SIM card, which also quickly drew the regulator's admonition. The one-time charge cannot be waived, according to a memo distributed to Telus staff, which instructed them not to encourage customers to call in requesting refunds or credits for any circumstance. The memo also said an additional $10 shipping charge would apply in some cases. Customers would see the fee on their first bill, both for physical or eSIM purchases. But Hutton told Telus last week that a SIM card or eSIM is required for the delivery of wireless service that a customer purchases and therefore does not meet the CRTC's criteria for an exemption. If TELUS has not ceased this practice, explain why, and provide supporting rationale as to why TELUS considers this practice to be in compliance with the exemption for optional services and products, or in compliance with the policy more generally, Kachi said in the regulator's latest letter to the company. The CRTC announced its new policy in March, saying it wanted to make it easier for consumers to switch internet and cell phone plans. The Commission said it hoped to empower Canadians to take advantage of better offers without having to worry about unexpected costs. And moving over to the opinion section, Niagara Voices, reading classics all summer long. Article by Joe Barkovich. I enjoy telling people I began reading the classics at an early age, like around 10 or 11. Some think I was referring to those great works written originally in Greek or Latin, but they were really classics illustrated comic books. Remember them? Back in the late 50s and early 60s, comics were one of 3 or 4 great possessions a kid coveted, at least in the way I saw life. The others were marbles, always played for keepsies, by the way, a CCM 2-wheeler, and baseball cards. I got most of my classics comics at Hannah's Rexall drugstore. I bought them using a portion of my allowance. Sure, there were other titles on the comics racks that were more popular, like Archie, Jughead, Betty and Veronica, Avengers, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, Superman, Batman, you know the drill. But a classics cover could be very enticing, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The Man in the Iron Mask, Frankenstein, or Moby Dick as examples. The other popular way of acquiring new titles for your collection was by trading. When you started making trades, it was like King Street turning to Wall Street some days. How hot and heavy could it get? It wasn't unusual for a hard-to-find classics title to be acquired by giving up a half dozen or so of your prized DC comics to another young collector. Ouch! But in the long run, it turned out to be worth it. The classics became cherished possessions with long-lasting shelf life. As I recall, classics illustrated books made great summertime reading. Once school was out for the summer, yes, reading. We may have left school on that last day in June with the chant, "No more teachers, no more books, no more teachers," dirty looks reverberating in our heads, but somehow reading remained closer to the heart, even with a full, rich menu of outdoor activities available in the old hood. The King Street pool was fun 3 or 4 times a week until you lost or had stolen from you a couple of towels and returned home empty-handed, resulting in loss of pool privileges for a few days. There was fishing from the west side abutments at the train bridge over the canal to keep us busy, but even being hooked on fishing succumbed to the power of the B word. Boring after a while. There was softball in the cottage field across from Joe Miller's on King Street, which always had a large following back in the day. And there was riding noisemaker bikes up and down 5th Street in the early evening. Remember them? They had part of an empty cigarette box or maybe a baseball card affixed to the frame by a wooden clothespin. The attachment was positioned touching the spokes, so it made sounds like a motorcycle as the bike sped by, upsetting the early evening summertime quiet for folks sitting outdoors. Our bad. When it came to reading, we gathered on the front porch some days and read comics, including the classics, all morning or afternoon. Tall glasses of ice-cold Freshie provided relief from the heat when needed. Remember Freshie? Those reading sessions turned into discussions, and before you knew it, to visits to the library to search the shelves for hardcover versions of the classics comics we had read. I amassed a fairly large collection of classics illustrated by the time I reached my teens. As I recall, most were given away to younger kids or left behind in the house when it came time to move. Later acquisitions were gifted to me by folks who knew I'd been a fan. I still have, and I still enjoy them. And I am thankful to Classics Illustrated for contributing to my appreciation of reading, which to this day remains with me. And our final article today from your Niagara Falls Review will stay in the opinion section. With gun myth debunked, it's time for action. Article by Ken Price and Heidi Rothian. For years after every shooting, the same voices pushed the same script. The vast majority of crime guns are smuggled across the border, so the only fix is tighter border controls. That narrative was always flawed. Now it is indefensible. New RCMP data obtained by the Canadian press regarding all crime guns traced in 2024 confirms what gun control advocates have said for years. The vast majority, 80%, of firearms recovered from crime scenes and traced by the RCMP are domestically sourced. Only 20% were smuggled into Canada. Just 4% were linked to organized crime, and of those, 80% were domestic. In other words, most crime guns begin on the shelves of a licensed dealer only to be straw purchased when a license holder buys a gun for someone unlicensed, or stolen, legally or illegally resold, or misused by their legal owner. Yet the "it's all smuggled guns" line was repeated by gun lobbyists and their political allies until it became the dominant message in the media. For years, that narrative has been a permission slip for many politicians to curry favor with the gun lobby by undermining controls on the legal market, like banning handguns and assault weapons. If the problem is over there, why do anything over here? No more excuses. The federal prohibition on assault weapons, announced in May 2020 after the Nova Scotia massacre, has been on the books in some form for more than 6 years. The compensation program is still being rolled out, but the ban is incomplete. The Soviet SKS rifle remains legal and unrestricted, despite being the model most often used in mass shootings and the murder of police officers. And the government just pushed back the deadline for a 4th time to remove prohibited weapons from circulation. Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba oppose the ban and buyback program, citing smuggled guns. 3 of these provinces are preparing to intervene at the Supreme Court in support of the challenge, seeking to invalidate the government's authority to ban certain types of dangerous weapons. These provincial interventions go against the values of most Canadians who reject U.S.-style gun culture and expect their governments to spend taxpayer money upholding the law to strengthen public safety, not fighting it in court to make military-style weapons legal again. Critics say banning assault weapons won't stop cross-border trafficking. They are right, and no serious advocate has argued otherwise. Stronger border enforcement, deeper cooperation with U.S. authorities, and greater investment in police operations are what's needed to stem the flow, especially to Toronto, where American-sourced handguns make up 9 in 10 of seized crime guns. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 17th, 2026 issue of the Niagara Falls Review. We read from the Niagara Falls Review every Saturday at 7 p.m. Your reader has been Dan Arth, and I thank you very much for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the Wall Street Journal off duty at 9 o'clock. We have Sports Illustrated at 10 o'clock. We have The Athletic. Stay with us for these readings and even more. You're listening to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books. For nearly 40 years, radio reading has served people who are blind or have a print disability throughout western New York and southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service studios are located at 1199 Harlem Road. Please spread the word about your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. For more information, call 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,